I went to school for accounting and finance. I learned all the stuff to do with the old financial system, um, and I worked in it. I dealt with it. I worked with people who wanted to make as much money as they could, and once I understood what Bitcoin is, I feel like there's no going back. Right? There's no going back to the old system because it doesn't make any sense anymore. Right? And I just once that happened, I started studying it. I started figuring it out in around 2020, I believe it was, right during the lockdowns, during when everybody was sitting at home. I started spending more time just learning about what this thing is, listening to podcasts. Uh, Funny thing is, one of the reasons why I looked into this a little bit more was because of Peter Schiff. He
No way.
was Yeah, it's crazy because his economics knowledge is great. He knows a lot about what he's talking about. He knows very well what he's talking about. Is His theory with gold is, of course, so important because I mean, it makes sense, right? Gold is scarce. It has all the characteristics that we need money to have, and I think he was constantly mentioning Bitcoin near the end of every single one of his podcasts, and it was pretty funny because he hated it so much, but he couldn't stop talking about it,
You know,
right? And
he actually, I was a big gold bug back in 2010 or 2012, long time ago. And he
mhm.
was one of the first few guys I stumbled across that was really a proponent of just buying gold. And so I caught on to his content long before, gosh, 7 years before I caught on to Bitcoin, even heard about Bitcoin. So
Wow.
know him well.
Yeah, so I think him talking about it, I feel like that planted the seed. I didn't really start looking into it until it was one of my friends who told me to look into it. He told me Bitcoin is this stat, learn about it. This was when Bitcoin dropped to like $3,500. Do you remember in 2020 when it dropped? I think it had something to do with China, the the
The ban on
mining ban. Yeah, yeah, that's something
mining.
like that. I don't remember the exact reason, but I remember the price. It was at $3,500, and I was just thinking, oh, it's gonna go lower. I don't want to pay this much. I want to get it for cheaper, and I left it, and I didn't pay attention again until it reached. I think I started paying attention again when um, somebody told me to study Michael Saylor, study the Bitcoin Standard, read the book, and by then I think Bitcoin was significantly higher than where it was when I first saw it. So I mean, honestly, I felt like it was too late. Now people are feeling like they're too late. I know for a fact 10 years from now they're going to feel like they're early, right? They were early in 2024. People are buying small amounts, they're buying whatever they can. I mean, even those tiny amounts are going to add up to so much, right? Most people don't see this. Most people don't get it yet, and that's the reason why, right? Most people have no allocation. Most people have zero. Once they do have allocation, they're going to want to buy it from the people who own it. So that's
Now,
just how it is.
are you kind of like the 900 trillion divided by 21 million, and they get the 43 million per coin kind of thesis, or is that kind of how you look at it? Basically, the planet divided by 21 million is where we're heading.
No, I don't think that makes sense. I thought it made sense before. I thought it made a lot of sense before. I actually have a couple of tweets explaining that, but
Oh,
now that I think about it, I feel like that's low, right? Because there's a guy named British Hodl. He mentioned how Bitcoin is priced at the margin, and I always knew about this, but I hadn't really applied it to Bitcoin. Um, I hadn't really looked at Bitcoin from that perspective because with Bitcoin, when you buy it, you're buying it from the marginal seller. You're buying it from whoever's willing to sell to you. When you assume that it's everything divided by 21 million, the problem is that you expect that the circulating supply is that 21 million. The circulating supply is going to be much lower, right? A lot of people are just going to be passing Bitcoin along with their friends and family. They're not actually going to sell it. I think I actually created a video on this on YouTube. I posted it on Twitter as well, but I personally think that there's no ceiling for Bitcoin's price. It can go to millions, it can go to billions,
Right,
it can go to
right.
trillions of dollars, right? Because technically the US dollar is unlimited and the US government is paying like $1 trillion in interest alone to maintain this debt. And that's just going to go up, right? It's not like the US government debt is going to decrease. It's just going to keep
So
going up. even based on their own assumptions, they're assuming that it's going to go up linearly. But if it does, it's still growing, and they're going to have to pay more and more interest each year unless the rates come down, which I don't think they can last. I think the US dollar is going to collapse if they keep doing that. But I mean, the Fed is stuck in a very difficult position. The US government is stuck in a very difficult position. So
Yeah. I'm going to give a very maybe fifth grade level understanding of.
yeah, that's great. Yeah.
One would be, like you said, everything's not for sale when all Bitcoins are not for sale when you go to buy it. So what really sets the price is who's selling. And so that's what they mean by at the margins. Am I kind of saying that correctly?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's exactly. I feel like for the people who don't understand it, that's it. That's a perfect explanation.
And then the other thing is, separate from that, a whole nother system, the fiat system, is constantly printing.
Hmm.
So that's another one setting the price, or at
Yeah.
least influencing it. And then another one is everything's falling in cost. So I think Jeff Booth talks a lot about how the world is
Oh,
Bitcoin.
sorry. You cut out for a second there. Maybe it was just my end. Go ahead.
Sure, the world is a deflationary world, and Bitcoin is deflationary by nature because I think over time, it's becoming more and more rare because I don't think we've had, and maybe you can speak to this, but have you thought about how we haven't really had a generational transfer of Bitcoin yet? And I think there's going to be a lot of losses where Bitcoin's actually becoming more rare due to human error. There's less and less. There's not all 21 for sale, even right now, if you could get them all. Many are.
Yeah, you might be able to get, like, if you wanted to, if you really, really wanted to, and you went on Coinbase or you went on any exchange. I think the number right now is something like 2.8 million Bitcoin are on exchanges. I might be wrong, maybe a little bit lower, maybe a little higher.
Mhm.
But if you think about it, those are the only Bitcoin that are available on exchanges. Of course, there's more that could come to the market, but the thing is that you have to also consider that there's an estimate of 3 to 5 million that are lost,
Mhm.
right? So when you consider that, you're left with 15 to 18, 15 to 17 million Bitcoin. And then
Yep.
you have just a bunch of people who are probably never going to sell, right? Because they know what this is. They have produced more than they consume. They're regularly doing that. And because they're doing that, they're not going to need to sell it, right? I know people who, there's people on Twitter who have thousands of Bitcoin. They're never going to have to spend that much money, right? They're going to give it away, or they're just going to hold on to it forever.
Not only that, but a lot of the early Bitcoin and current Bitcoin buyers are buying with excess revenue. So of their discretionary income, they're already making two, three, four times what they need to live on. So if they need to buy something, they don't need to sell their Bitcoin. They can just consume more of their disposable income. So this is almost like a generational wealth that they're just piling up for their heirs. And
Yeah.
I think that is a big chunk of Bitcoin hodlers, especially the long term ones. They're like, yeah, that's my deep storage. I've got cash and property that I could sell if I ever really wanted to get something here in the fiat land. Uh,
Yeah.
and so
100% completely agree.
yeah, and that's not lost. It's not locked up behind cryptography, but it's almost as good as lost to at least this time period. That might be sold by an heir that inherits it, but maybe not by the guy that understand what he's buying. So I think you almost have to wait for that generational transfer for a big chunk of Bitcoin because the people that are acquiring it aren't. They plan on leaving it in a will to their children. And so that's another chunk. And I think that's a big chunk that's locked up for maybe 10, 20 years in cold storage. So what are some other factors that you think kind of drive the price up? Maybe like price discovery or any other insight on that?
I think a lot of people see people who are just holding as not doing anything, but I feel like the people who are holding Bitcoin are directly impacting the price. They're directly having an impact on increasing the price. They're the ones who are eventually going to make it so that mining becomes sustainable for these large institutions because they're not going to sell their Bitcoin. If the price goes too low, they're not going to sell, right? So that's part of it. There's also, I don't think most people have considered that overnight there could be just a random sovereign nation, Japan, China, even the US, India, where they could go and buy every single Bitcoin on every single exchange available, right?
Can
And who's
you
going to stop them?
can you talk about the $1 trillion checkbooks? Like, if you think about who could write $1 trillion check to just go buy, here's $1 trillion, go buy Bitcoin. Obviously, the US Treasury, a sovereign nation, the Saudi Wealth Fund. What are some of the other people that at any moment that could just break loose? And there, what might be 30, 40, 50 entities like Apple. Uh, have you thought about the type of people that could literally just say, go buy $1 trillion worth, or half a trillion dollars worth?
Even honestly, even $500 million worth is going to move the market, right? Half a billion dollars worth is a lot. I think what's really happening right now is the people who are figuring it out are just buying as much as they can. Like Michael Saylor, he's going into as much debt as he can to buy Bitcoin because he knows what he's doing. I mean, he's studied it. He understands where this is going. He knows that this is money for the entire world. BlackRock could probably convince their clients to do that. They have $10 trillion under management, maybe more right now, but they could
Mhm.
do that. Um, of course, China has what, $1 trillion worth of treasuries, something along those lines. I think they sold some over the last little while, but they have $1 trillion worth of treasuries. They can easily sell those. Maybe not sell all of them all at once, but they could sell them over time and use that to directly just funnel it into Bitcoin, right? There are institutions all over the world. I think one of the things that most people are missing is that most of the wealthiest people in the world don't get it yet,
Mhm.
right? Like Warren Buffett, he's he doesn't understand. In my opinion, he doesn't truly understand how money works, right? If he understood how money works, then he wouldn't be saying that. Back when I was agreeing with him, oh, saying that gold is trash, gold is this, gold is that, I didn't understand how money worked, right? So, from my perspective, knowing that I didn't understand how money works, I always thought that Bitcoin was a scam because of that. I always thought gold was trash because I worked in the financial industry, right? We were selling people stocks, people were buying as many stocks as they could. And I always thought that gold was a waste of money, a waste of time. But once I understood, like once I read the Bitcoin standard, for example, it's a no-brainer,
Mhm.
right? At that point, there's no way to not get it. I think more and more billionaires, more and more people who have lots of wealth, they're gonna read that book, they're gonna understand this, they're gonna need to switch over to Bitcoin rather than having thousands of rental properties.
While we're on that topic, I am just started this book.
Oh
Bro-
yes.
well, it's backwards. Broken Money, Bitcoin Standard. Are there any others aside from those that you would recommend, that you've gone through that maybe were impactful on where you are right now?
Yeah. There's the Internet of Money by Andreas Antonopoulos.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, that one's great. I haven't read The Price of Tomorrow. I believe that's what it's called from Jeff Booth. But I've listened to so many of his podcasts. I feel like I have a gist of what he's trying to say. But I would suggest reading that book if you can. If you don't have time to read the podcast to listen to the podcast, maybe read his book because he knows what he's talking about. Just based on his conversation, I can see that. Oh, maybe he's a smart guy. Maybe he knows what he's saying. But maybe
Mhm.
that's a great book to look into. There's also Fiat Food.
Oh
Uh,
yes, we had them on the show. I loved that. I need to.
Matthew Lishik.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah,
it was really good.
great. I haven't read the book, but I've listened to his podcast. I've listened to um, Saifedean's podcast. I've done the research to listen to or to figure out how I guess the food industry pretty much owns the world and how they control it. I mean, it's kind of just a way of deducing that that's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to. I mean, the goal in that case is they're trying to get us reliant on their production, take the means of production out of our hands so we rely on them forever, and that's pretty much the
Mhm.
goal there. And they're going to keep lowering the quality of the food that we eat, they're going to keep decreasing the quality, move us on to the pharmacare side of things, and it's just a cycle, right? It's just a cycle of death and destruction.
Now, what it looks like, you, along with many others, studying Bitcoin, like to go to almost the live podcasts and YouTube channels where we're going straight to people that are at the front line. What are some of the channels or personalities that you're kind of consume regularly to stay up to date on all the above?
I like Preston Pish. like what Bitcoin did. That one's great. That one's really good. It's not as much about current events. His are more about theoretical things, talking to people who maybe understand how the network works, or maybe they were around when Bitcoin was a year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, right? There's a really good one, Simply Bitcoin. I really like their podcast because they're constantly talking about current events. It makes things a lot easier to digest. They kind of, I think this is what they say. They get rid of the noise and they give you the signal, pure signal or something like that. It's a great show. Their
Yeah,
content is awesome. Even their Twitter is great.
we're having them. I think next week, either this week or next week.
Amazing.
So that
Th-
I'm trying to give as many as much airtime to all these people producing content as possible, both here on the video and from the 8 to 10. Uh,
Absolutely.
but I agree, they do some good. They do really produce some good content there.
I was on one of their podcasts before before I fully understood Bitcoin, and I was saying on their podcast that Bitcoin doesn't compete with real estate and stocks. So I mean, that's the thing, right? Everybody
Mm-mm.
starts off wrong. They start off not understanding it. They start off dismissing it, or maybe they have certain misconceptions about it, about Bitcoin. And once you really do the work, once you put in the time to understand what this is, it's nearly impossible not to dismiss every other asset.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like I don't know if you've stumbled upon Jason Lowry and his kind of content, but
Proof
it's
of war.
yeah, the battleship and the cruiser and the destroyer don't compete with the airplane.
Yeah.
It's just on a different playing field. You don't need so many men. You need one guy with one torpedo to level that entire whatever ship he sinks. And
Yeah.
and I think in a very similar way, Bitcoin exists on a different plane. It's part of the cyber warfare, or the it's the digitization of physical property, and so the physical can't compete with digital. It's almost like Blockbuster competing with Netflix. It's one has brick and mortar video plastic tapes that you got to drive to, and the other one just live streams to your phone.
Yeah.
So it's like Uber versus a taxi fleet. And I
Mhm.
look at that as the am I framing? Am I correct me if I'm wrong? Am I thinking of that correctly in your eyes?
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree with you. I think it's important to see it from that perspective because Bitcoin is called digital gold, but if you think about it, Netflix is digital Blockbuster, but you can do so much more with Netflix than you could with Blockbuster,
Mm-hmm.
right? Same thing with Bitcoin. Okay, let's even look at watches. We have digital watches versus we have, like, let's say Rolexes. A Rolex that shows you the day costs 10 times more than one that doesn't show you the day, right? Today, every single watch shows you the day. We have digital watches that show you the day. They show you your heart temperature or your heart rate. They show you they show you all these stats. They show you how well you slept. How much would that cost if you put all those features into a Rolex? $10 million?
Yeah, if you could get them all in there.
How would that even work? Exactly, right? You'd have a watch like that big. Like it wouldn't even work. I mean, that's the thing, right? With with Bitcoin, we can continuously improve it. We can continuously make it better based on consensus rules, based on what everybody is okay with. You can't do that with gold. Gold is stuck in one place. We don't even Most of the gold is just sitting in people's vaults, right? It's not being used in electricity or in electronic devices. It's not being used for the purpose that it's meant to be used for. I know a lot of people, a lot of gold bugs say, I'm sure you've experienced this as well, but a lot of gold bugs say that gold is valuable because it has industrial uses. That's something that Peter Schiff constantly says. He
Right.
says that Bitcoin can't be valuable because gold has industrial uses, Bitcoin doesn't. Bitcoin has no utility, but that's the point. When something has utility, when something is when something has use cases outside of the form of, let's say, outside of money, then you can't use it as money. It doesn't work. More and more people are going to be separated from that, from being able to generate and accumulate wealth. So, for example, we have houses. A lot of people think that houses are a great way to, houses are so important because of their utility. People want houses. House prices go up because people need to live in them. How many people own a house? to live in, right? If you think about it, I've seen so many advertisements for new builds, condos being built. They're all talking about the investor. Every single one. If have you noticed that?
And I've noticed that, when we talk about the price of Bitcoin set at the margins, and who is at the margins, the buyers and sellers, and who are the
Yes.
biggest checkbooks? Investors.
Yes.
Okay. So if the price is set at the margin in real estate and the
Yeah.
investors hold the biggest checkbook, when those checkbooks discover that Bitcoin is a better ROI investment, risk averse property, they're going to leave that table, and it'll just be people looking to live in the house left
Yeah.
as buyers. And I think we have not seen the mass exodus of real estate investors yet. And when that comes, I feel bad for people owning property.
People who own property as a savings vehicle.
That's right, as a
If
savings.
you own if you own property to live in, you're good, right? I mean, that's what it's meant for. But if
That's
you
right.
own property as a savings vehicle, I mean, you're kind of screwed, right?
How does that affect all of these and bank loans that are collateralized by the piece of property? And doesn't that
Oh,
force them to just uh, devalue the dollar more and more and more, so that that loan stays collateral, because they're locked into this for 30 years with
yeah.
that asset at current market prices. So it would be devastating if housing prices just plummeted. That means all the mortgage industry's loans are way under collateralized and are upside down. Am I thinking of that correctly, or what am I missing there?
100%. I mean, that's exactly what it is. See, the way that I think of it, the real estate market has become a Ponzi scheme, right? And the people who are benefiting from it, the people who are getting if you look at the SEC's definition for a Ponzi scheme, it's basically something that guarantees you a return. It's something that has a person at the top or somebody who's getting control, who can control the system. Essentially, the people controlling the real estate Ponzi scheme are the banks, right? Because they can just give out as many loans as they want to. If, let's say, people start trying to leave real estate, they'll start giving loans at negative interest rates, right? Because that's the only way to get people to spend more. If rates are already at zero and everybody who wants to buy has already bought, where are you going to go next? You can't keep stimulating with zero interest rates when rates are already at zero, right? So when you exactly what you said, um, the mass exodus of real estate investors is probably coming. I don't know when. I don't know how long it'll take. Who knows when people will figure it out. My goal is to help people figure it out before people leave, before people are left hanging, holding the bag. I mean, let the real estate, let the hedge funds hold the bag. Don't hold the bag yourself. Get rid of it. There's a lot of people who argue with me. They say, "Oh, I own 30 properties and I'm doing perfectly fine." But the thing is that your property isn't growing. It's not gaining in value. It's the dollar that's losing value. So there's one thing that I want to that I want to actually touch on based on what you said. The price is determined at the margin. So if at any time, how many properties do you think are on sale? Maybe like 0.5% of the total,
Okay.
maybe less, maybe more. If, let's say, all these real estate investors try to leave the market all at once, how many properties are going to go on sale at that point? So in Toronto, 57% of new build condos are owned by investors. So what happens when 57% of those properties, the total 57% of the total pool of properties goes on the market? What's going to happen? I don't think that's going to happen all at once, but let's say even instead of 0.5%, we go to 5%, which means
Wow.
one in every five houses, or sorry, uh, not 5%. I meant, yeah, okay, so let's go with 5%. That means that one in 20 houses are going to be on sale. Right now, you have one in every 200. So that 10x's how many houses are going on sale, right? What happens in that case? If you have no buyers, price will have to keep coming down because there will be people who are desperate to sell. They realize that holding this property, this steaming bag of manure, is not worth it to them because they have so much work that they have to do. There's so much stress involved. There's so much maintenance. There's so many costs involved. Why would you continue holding this when you can just hold this digital gold and never have to rely on getting paid from by a tenant again? Why not just create your own cash flow by selling small chunks of your Bitcoin, which will always go up in value?
Right. Well, and maybe help explain this. There is a seller on the market that has no bottom. Whereas if you are an individual owner, you at least want to get what you have left on the loan. But
Mm-hmm.
if your home ends in foreclosure and it's up for sheriff's sale, the bank just says sell it for whatever the sheriffs can get for it. And so they
Mm-hmm.
really have no bottom. If they have a $200,000 home and they get 30,000 for it, then it just rolls over because they have unlimited money. Whereas you as an individual might say, okay, I got a $200,000 home. I only got 100,000 left in it. I have to at least get that to pay off the loan. Whereas the bank can just sell it at any price. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think they can drive a market like you've just described even lower. Um, and they are, I know foreclosures in a depressed market are a big chunk of sellers when a market's going down. You've got the banks actually selling against you, not just other homeowners selling against you.
Right.
I think that's something to consider is that you've got people that will dump supply on the market and they don't care what they get for it. They're just trying to get out from under it.
Yeah, I mean that's the important thing, right? There's a lot of people who are in the market right now who don't care about real estate as an investment. If you go on Twitter, a lot of people who talk about real estate as an investment, it's almost like a religion, right? They're gonna support it no matter what. Doesn't matter what the facts are. Doesn't matter. Um, doesn't matter where the market is going. Doesn't matter if the chart is literally going straight down compared to Bitcoin. Doesn't matter. They're gonna support it no matter what, right? The the difference between them and, let's say, a hedge fund that's losing 10% on their property, the hedge fund has no sentimental value for real estate whatsoever. They don't care. They don't have any beliefs. They don't. Their goal is just to make money, right? If
ROI is
Bitcoin
their
is
religion.
exactly, they don't
Return on
care.
investment is their religion. That's it.
Yeah, they make more money is their religion. That's it. They will dump their 10,000 properties on the market if they have to, right? They don't care. They really don't care at all. They don't care about your feelings. They don't care about who you are. They don't care about what your parents told you. They don't care about what your grandparents told you. They don't care about how well your grandparents did from real investing in real estate. None of that matters. The
Right.
fact is that these hedge funds hold thousands of properties. They hold, I think hedge funds hold something like 2% of properties in total, something like that. Hedge funds and
Wow.
institutional investors, something like that. But if those 2% of properties go on the market, and right now there's what, 0.5%, maybe even less than that. In my area, I think it's even lower because you barely see any houses on sale. But if these properties start selling, we see people who never even planned to sell start panicking. Right? That's how meltdowns happen. Right? That's how meltdowns begin. That's where people get scared. They already can't afford the mortgage on this property. They're expecting the rates to go down. Rates aren't coming down. Now all these houses are on sale. Now these houses are selling for cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And now these people start panicking. They just get rid of whatever they can, right? That's just how it is.
Let me and I love this topic. I try to bring it up as often as possible because I used to help manage a small real estate portfolio for my father when I
Mm,
was young. It was just part of how our family made money in addition to other businesses. But I always heard and I always hear this from real estate people that well, they're not making any more land and they're looking at their home as if it's beachfront property. And then you see these cow pastures next to this city and you've got X number of doors in the city and you think that they're not going to print any more land. And then some real estate developer comes build 800 condos diluting the number of doors that you had and all of a sudden your land's not rare anymore because developers can come in and just build and they can turn a cow pasture which has 0 homes on it into 800 competitors for rent. So that's one. And maybe we can talk about the attack vectors on real estate. Number one is a real estate developer coming in and just bringing more supply and competition to the market. Number two is if you've dealt with renters, they are constantly devaluing your property. If you deal with state, local, and city taxes, they're constantly taxing or rezoning. And then you've got old Mother Nature that's coming in and beating it down with sun, with rain, with storms, with hail, with constant damage. And so we can't act like that this is an asset that doesn't need constant maintenance and upkeep and competition. And it's not like Bitcoin, which is just it's just there. It is what it is. It never changes. It's perfectly rare. If anything, it's better than rare. It's rarity. Plus, we're losing Bitcoin all the time. So, what are some other attack vectors that maybe I'm not thinking about, or maybe you can speak on some of the ones that I have spoken about that people need to consider when they're putting their money into real estate?
I think a lot of people don't see. There's another perspective that I like to look at it from, where most people don't see. I've mentioned this on a few of my posts, but 3D printed houses,
Oh yes,
right? Then there's
yeah,
stackable homes where, not stack. I don't know what it's called, but they're basically pre-manufactured homes
yeah,
where they build it in a factory,
right.
right?
Like a
All
sea
you need, like a what?
like a sea container in China that
Yeah,
unfolds the big origami into, it shows up as an 18 wheeler and then it transforms into a 1,000 square foot home. And it was
exactly.
made overseas and shipped to you. And all you need is a foundation. And they're coming.
Right. And I was actually speaking with someone who's working in China to do something like this to manufacture homes. Basically, all they're doing is they're building these homes in advance. Somebody can order it, let's say 2 years in advance or whenever they want to. They can order it whenever they want. They're building these homes in a factory. They're just putting together walls, and then whenever you have a piece of land that you can build that home on, they deliver it to you,
Mhm.
right? And it can be built in something like 2 to 3 days. I think it was 2 to 3 days. If you have the labor, they can even do it for. It's like IKEA furniture,
Mhm.
right? You're just
Oh,
putting
yeah.
it together.
Yeah, you will see if you've ever seen some of these sound stages at, say, a local festival, where an 18 wheeler will pull up and it's just the size of a normal 18 wheeler. And then all of a sudden, it goes from 8 feet tall to 20 feet tall with these pistons, and then it folds out its wings. And before you know it, you've got light, sound, stage, everything on an 18 wheeler. But when it pulls up,
Hmm.
it just looks like a normal box. And I've seen these in on site offices for construction sites. And I'm starting to see them as little tiny homes and then not so tiny homes. And next thing you know, you're just going to order on Amazon. Give me a camp to my deer camp. We have a lot of hunting down south. So you just order a deer camp for like 15 grand and it drops in setup and it's already built. It's done. Everything is done. You could even put furniture in these things from China and it's like a turnkey. All you need is a level ground. And what does that do to the construction of homes? And what does that do to now that's your competition when you're a landlord? Um, I and that is absolutely coming because it's just cheaper.
Yeah, it uses less labor. It
Mm,
uses less. It's easier to build. It's quicker. There's also the fact that, when you build in a factory, you can actually make it to whatever specifications you have. I mean, of course, you can do that with a house that's built like this as well, but it's much easier to do it in a factory. It'll probably be much, much, much cheaper if you have to do, let's say, certain parts, or if you want to put in certain features. It'd be much easier to build it in a factory. It'll cost less. It'll consume less labor. We'll be able to put our labor towards other things. Let's say the farmland that Bill Gates is buying, and he's not farming on it. Maybe we can have people actually growing food instead of working on, let's say, building houses in a site, construction
mhm,
workers, or I mean, this is another completely different perspective, but instead of people working, if we do go to a Bitcoin standard, instead of people working in the financial industry, we have people growing food, building houses, doing all these things instead of the financial industry absorbing all that labor, all those resources. We have actual products being built, and that's just completely changed, right? That's going to change in the coming years. I think we're going to see that. I think real estate is probably going to be the next thing that gets hit extremely hard. When real estate gets hit, it's very likely that the banking system goes next.
Now, give people maybe a window into how big the real estate bucket of money is. If we're looking at a $1.25 trillion market cap of Bitcoin, if it starts eating the elephant of real estate, how big is that elephant globally?
I think the total is something like 300 or 400 trillion dollars.
Wow.
There, okay, so I think the way that I think there's a different way to look at it. That makes sense. That's fine. But if you reverse it, it makes a lot more sense. So there are in total in the world 2.4 billion houses. There are 21 million Bitcoin. Out of those 21 million, of course, 3 to 5 million are lost. So there's 15 to 17 million. And then you have the fact that it's not just houses that are going to be valued. We have to value everything with Bitcoin. So, like you said, infinity over 21 million. But house prices, I think, are going to drop below 100,000 Satoshis.
Hmm.
Right now, you can get 6 or 7 Bitcoin for a house. In the coming years, you'll be able to get 100,000 Satoshis. So that's the difference is 700 million Satoshis versus 100,000 Satoshis. Right. So
Wow.
if you have a portfolio of let's say 30 houses, 50 houses, right now you can get what's 50 times 7? What's wrong with me? 350.
350. Yeah.
Yeah, 350. So you get 350 Bitcoin today for that 30 to or for that 50 house portfolio. In the coming years, 50 houses are going to give you uh 5 million Satoshis. When it goes to 100,000, eventually it will, right? It's
Mhm.
5 million versus 300 or 3.5, is it 3.5 billion Satoshis? Yeah, no, 35 billion Satoshis. So 35 billion Satoshis versus 5 million, right? And
Wow.
most people are just waiting it out. They're waiting. I mean, why
Now,
wouldn't you hedge yourself?
now maybe explain the gradually then suddenly nature of when people when it's early, it's very slow. But once people understand there's a run on the bank, how everybody drops what they're doing and just tries to exit at any cost. When does that talk about that, or when does that happen? What does that look like? Like maybe at a tenth of a percent of real estate investors moving to Bitcoin, maybe we don't realize it. But when this thing hits critical mass of like 5% or 2%, that's when everyone shows up to sell their stuff. Is there
Yeah,
behind that?
it's just the effect of compounding. Over time, you're going to have the growth is going to accelerate, right? So let's say in the beginning we had Satoshi Nakamoto and the cypherpunks knowing about Bitcoin. How many people was that? Maybe 10,
Hmm.
5, however many. Today, how many people know about Bitcoin? 500 million, right? And that didn't happen. It didn't happen in a straight line. It went up. It went up slowly. It gradually increased. In the beginning, it was very slow. Went from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 to 40, 50, 80 to 200 to 500. And then it started going up faster and faster until now we see these numbers where 500 million people know about it. Exactly the same thing with real estate. As more and more people figure it out, the knowledge will spread. And eventually, I think we're going to see very, very wealthy people selling their properties for Bitcoin, and that's how I think that's what's going to scare people. It's like extreme fear with Bitcoin, right? When the price drops a little bit, you see people selling even more because they think, oh, I'm gonna catch the drop. I'm gonna catch the falling knife at the bottom. Price starts dropping, starts slowly, then it just falls off, right? Exactly the same thing that's gonna happen with real estate. So right now, what real estate is 7 Bitcoin per house. That's the cost for one house. Eventually we're going to have thousands of people, millions of people, couple billion people selling their houses for real estate, or sorry, selling their houses for Bitcoin. And what happens in that case when demand doesn't keep up with supply? Things change. Things change completely. And then the
Yeah.
trust builds over time and it makes Bitcoin even better. It makes Bitcoin even more highly sought after. It's a Veblen good, right? Over time, as the price goes up, more and more people want it.
Now maybe talk about the minds that are controlling the money that I think it's my opinion. So maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but the minds that are controlling the majority of the 900 trillion of global assets are for the most part unaware of Bitcoin or have studied Bitcoin. It's a very niche coder, curious, first movers that are holding Bitcoin. But if you look at maybe who's holding $500 trillion worth of wealth, the tiny, tiny group of people that control that, it's not, when these people show up, it's not a one vote, one person equals one vote. It's one person could control 0.5% of the global supply of money because it's maybe somebody that's managing a sovereign wealth fund. So it's not a numbers game as far as we need another, several billion people. If just 10,000 of the right people understand Bitcoin, they could move half the world's wealth. Have you thought about, and these are not the dumbest people in the world. If anything, they have gotten to where they are because they're able to predict markets and move and maybe get ahead. And that's why they've been given so much money and power to manage. Have you thought about those people coming in?
I haven't, but I mean, it's all just relative, right? I mean, it's exactly what you're saying. Once they get it, they're gonna move in quick,
Mm-hmm.
right? Nobody wants to lose wealth. Nobody wants to watch their portfolio drop in value, in real value, in real terms, right? When you see the S&P 500 going up, what, 10% a year, the actual return on that is probably, when you look at how much money is being printed. There was a chart that I saw that showed the S&P 500's growth versus the M2 money supply increase.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same, right? So in real terms, you're not going anywhere. You're just saving your wealth, and you're able to outperform everyone because everybody else is just holding this thing that's a melting ice cube. You're holding the one thing that is the means of production. And because you have the means of production, because you have shares, you have ownership in the means of production, your wealth increases because you can sell the goods that are produced with those means of production to other people. And those people are willing to pay you for it because maybe they're necessities. Just because you're outperforming the average person who's holding cash doesn't mean that you're doing well, though.
Mm-hmm.
10% a year is, I think the estimate for the money supply growth was like 7 to 15%.
Mm-hmm.
So more than half the years, you're losing money, right?
Yeah.
More than half the time, you're losing money. You're not making money. You're just stagnant, if anything. If
You,
No,
you
go
might
ahead.
you might be in the ballroom of the Titanic and not in the boiler room, but you're still on the Titanic.
Yeah,
Either way, it's going
exactly.
down.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. You're gonna hit maybe you're at the back of the Titanic. You're gonna hit the iceberg, but you're gonna be impacted by it last,
Yeah.
right? That's just what it is. The stock market is basically a way to distract people from maybe this is controversial. Maybe this is probably
Mm-hmm.
going to bother some people, but the stock market, real estate investing, bonds, all this stuff, it's a way to distract people from the ultimate physical bearer asset, which is gold. And because banks have taken full control of it, because they don't want people to own gold, all that money is being filtered into stocks, real estate, bonds. How much do you think gold would be if all these things didn't exist? Right? I would say an ounce would probably be 50, 60, $100,000. Right? Because again, price is determined at the margin. If everybody wanted to hold gold in their safes, price would be significantly higher than where it is today. But all that money is being instead put into stocks. It's being put into real estate. Instead of people building their own businesses, they're investing in someone else's business by buying stocks. They're basically extorting someone for a basic human need by owning real estate. Right? I mean, back when Bitcoin didn't exist, it made sense. Now it doesn't. Now that Bitcoin is here, now that anyone can buy it, anyone can own it, doesn't make sense anymore to own real estate. I used to be one of those people who wanted rental properties, but now I see it. Doesn't make any sense.
Oh yeah. I got out of my home. I rent now, and I sold all my Tesla stock and companies. I am 100% into Bitcoin, and I can tell you, I feel like I am part of it's almost like I moved from Blockbuster to Netflix. It's like I understand the technological advantage it has over the brick and mortar business, and that this is the future. And
Yeah,
if you miss this train, you I feel like it's like you're stuck in the Bronze Age, trying to compete with somebody that's got air power.
yeah,
Uh, as a fiduciary, as an investor, I don't see, once you understand this, how you just can't stop what you're doing and move.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
That's the logical thing to do.
Completely agree. I think the people who, let's say, for example, if you had a goal of owning, let's say, zero point 0.1 Bitcoin, that goal is going to be 10 times, 50 times, 100 times harder to achieve in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you can get to that 0.1, 0.01, whatever you want to, even 1, 10, if you can get to 100 Bitcoin, do it now, because in 10 years, it's going to be significantly harder when everybody wants to own it, right? So getting to that goal, I mean, you did it early. I think I'm pretty early. I started in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who's starting today, still early,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
There's a lot of people who have started buying Bitcoin because of my content. They let me know, they're like, oh, hey, I started buying Bitcoin because of you. Thank you for showing me this. I don't care if it goes down. I understand it now. I see where it's going. But if I wasn't for your content, I wouldn't have bought it. But they're buying way more Bitcoin than I can ever afford.
Right.
They're getting a way bigger benefit from it than I am.
Yes.
But that's okay. That's right. That's it. Right. That's the point. The goal is to help people get to their get to whatever their allocation should be before these institutions figure it out. The more that average people hold, the more that you hold, more that I hold, more that these followers of ours hold, the better off we are, right?
Yeah.
Because
And I don't think it's a matter of getting off the Titanic early or late. It's just get off the Titanic, and you'll be
yeah,
thankful that you're off of it when it goes to the bottom. And you really won't care whether you got the first lifeboat or the last lifeboat. At least you're not completely ruined trying to find your way
yeah,
from out of devastation.
it's like sitting on the edge versus sitting in the middle, right? If you have 0.01, you're sitting at the edge because you got on there late, but you're still on the lifeboat. You're
Yeah.
maybe you're holding very little, but in I mean, I don't think that's going to be very little in a few years. Maybe right now it's like five, six, $700 worth, but in the next few years, that sitting on the edge with that 0.01 or 0.001, whatever you can afford, you're gonna be protected, right? You're not gonna be hit by the iceberg.
Right. Well, so we've got about 12 minutes or maybe a little bit longer left. I wanted you to maybe tell the community about, your experiences on Twitter, what you seek to, what the value you seek to provide, and maybe even how you go about thinking about your X posts, and to kind of help us look into that world, at least through your eyes a little bit.
Definitely. I think it's really difficult teaching how Bitcoin works because there's so many different factors that play into it, right? There's so many different topics. You have to kind of assume that everybody has a basic level of understanding, but most people don't, right? You can't explain how money works in every single post, right?
Mhm.
You can't explain just the absolute basics in every single post. You have to go a little deeper. So my goal is to keep going deeper, keep going deeper. Just assume that the people who are following me, maybe they have some level of knowledge, maybe they understand it. Of course, I'm going to keep adding on that basic content. That's the key. I've been making a lot of those basics posts on YouTube, a lot of those videos where I'm just teaching you why Bitcoin is going to go to $1 billion, why it's going to go to why $1 million is not enough to retire. I think a lot of people don't understand the basics, and once they do, once they get it, it's very difficult not to go to Bitcoin. So my goal will be to keep diving deeper, keep going, keep getting better analogies, teach it better over time. And I feel like my skills with just teaching people how this thing works have been improving, and
Yeah.
it works for me too, right? Because I keep learning more. I keep absorbing more content from other people like yourself. Everybody who posts on Twitter, they add a little bit of knowledge to everyone else. You have an impact on every single person who sees your posts. Eventually, people who are bears today are going to refer back to my tweets, to your tweets, to whoever else there is. They're going to refer back to those tweets, and they're going to see that maybe I should have listened to that guy back then. Maybe I'll start listening to him now.
Yeah. And maybe talk about how doing makes you better, not just about reading, but by actually trying to create your own content. What does that do to your learning curve and your depth of knowledge?
For me personally, it made me ask a lot more questions, right?
Mm.
If there's a topic that I'm trying to teach, let's say if I'm trying to explain what a recession is, I can tell you that, oh, a recession is a period of a downturn, but why? It's because maybe interest rates have gone up, maybe fewer people are investing, but why? It's because inflation has gone up, but why? It's because money has been printed, but why? It just keeps going, right? But once you write for yourself, once you create your own content, that's the only way to do that. A lot of people, they uh, for me, for example, if there's a topic that I don't quite understand and I'm not creating content for it, I'll probably go on Twitter, read the content from maybe another reputable account, but I don't know if they're wrong. Maybe they missed out on a crucial assumption. Maybe they made an assumption that's completely wrong, right? But I'm expected them to be right. So let's say, for example, for me, I'm creating my content, I'm posting whatever. There's a lot of times where people are pointing out that I'm wrong, and they're right. I am wrong. I am completely wrong. But then, if I didn't create my own content, if I didn't put it out there, I wouldn't have had these thoughts in the first place. If I
Mhm.
didn't put it out there, I wouldn't be able to see that I'm wrong and get to the right conclusion. I wouldn't be able to see that. There's been so many times where an account with 15 followers tells me, "Hey, this is wrong. You're completely
Right.
wrong." I know a lot of people. They'll be like, "Oh, ignore them. They have too little followers. They're
Right.
irrelevant. The followers are all that matters and all that stuff." But that's not true. That's not true at all, right? Even if you have 10 followers, if you have 10 people who are looking at your content,
Yeah.
you have some value. You know what you can create some value for anyone, right? It does The follower count doesn't matter. The most important thing is getting the content out there, helping people to get to that, I guess, signal. The biggest mistake that a lot of people are making right now they're just ignoring it because they don't understand it. It's too complicated for them, right?
Right.
Avoid that. Don't be in that situation 10 years from now. Creating content was the only reason why I started really understanding it more. Before I started creating content, I was thinking, oh, this garbage, scam, buying air. Why would I want to buy air? Why would I want to put
Right.
all my net worth in this? But I mean, once you start putting out the content, once you start diving deeper, once you start really understanding what this is, it
Mhm.
helps you, right? Every single video that I make, it takes 10, 15, 20 hours of research, takes a ton of content, takes a ton of time to edit it. In that time, I'm also learning. There's been so many times where I've created a video thinking I'm so confident about this topic. And then when I read more about it, I'm humbled. And
Yes.
that's the only way to learn, right?
Yeah, and I would say for those creating anything, assume take the position that you are wrong. It's just a
Hmm.
matter of how wrong, and encourage your audience to show you where you're wrong. And if you approach your content creation and honor the wisdom of your audience, they will point out your 1% and 2% errors. And now you can go redesign and recreate, making those 1 or 2% incremental improvements along the way with the tailwind of your entire hive mind audience behind you, helping you improve it and spot the errors. And all you got to do is ask for it. And I do this
Yeah.
all the time with my show. And I say, look, guys, I know I am producing terrible content and I know I'm wrong in so many directions. So please, my lifeblood is your criticisms. And and once I do that, the flood of your sound's a little off, your lighting's a little off, actually you're kind of right, but have you thought about this? And next thing you know, you've got your fans or participating in helping you create just better and better content that make you better. And they're not doing it if you give them permission to do it. They're not doing it to be know-it-alls. They're consumers of your content and they love to participate in the process. I
Yeah.
love my audience. They're always ripping me apart, but I ask them to.
Yeah.
um,
It's a good feeling when you have somebody who gives you some kind of feedback that actually works. There was somebody who I didn't notice this before, uh, but for whatever reason, I think I was doing it here for a bit, but I keep saying right at the end of my sentences. I didn't realize it until somebody pointed it out to me. And I've improved significantly. If you look at my old videos, every single video that I make, every single sentence, it ends with right because I'm just thinking, oh, what do I say next? What do I say next? Now I've gotten better at it, and the only reason why I even figured it out is because somebody pointed it out. Otherwise, I wouldn't have seen it happening.
it's kind of like proof. It's similar to proofreading a uh, something that you've written, and
Yes.
after a few times, the mistakes you can't see because you've proofread this one thing 10 times, and by the 10th time, the mistake is just part of the product.
Yeah.
But a new fresh set of eyes will come and spot it right away.
Hmm.
Uh, you have the word "and" twice, and you read over it back to back, and there's and
Yeah.
it's amazing how the mind starts to just not see what's in plain sight when it's just become familiar with the product.
Yeah.
So that's great. Any other tricks for content creators looking to kind of do something similar as yourself?
Just start. I think that's the hardest
Oh
thing
yeah.
for people to do. They don't start. They keep thinking, I don't know enough. I need to learn more. You're always going to feel like you don't know enough. You're always going to feel like you need to learn more. There's never going to be a time where you've learned everything.
Hmm.
Even now, after learning about Bitcoin for 3 years, I'm still learning new things. I'm still learning new concepts every single day. I'm learning. I learned about UTXO management in August of 2023 last year. And I was studying Bitcoin for what 2.5 years at that point, and I still hadn't come across this topic.
Yeah.
So no matter if I had given up, let's say I had given up right before that 2.5 year point, and I'm just like, okay, I'm done. I don't need to learn this anymore. I'm going to go back to whatever I was doing before. I would have missed UTXO management. I would have missed the environmental impact of Bitcoin and how. Do you know how gas flaring works?
No, go ahead and tell us.
Oh, so gas flaring is basically where miners can go into wherever oil is being extracted from the earth. So natural gas is it's a byproduct of oil extraction. So what miners are doing is instead of burning that gas, miners are creating rigs in the oil fields and they're mining Bitcoin with that gas, with that natural gas. So it's more efficient instead of burning it and adding methane to the environment. They're they're efficiently mining Bitcoin with that gas. So previously, if you even Google this, if you look at like the World Health, or sorry, is it the World Bank? I think it's their site, the World Bank. Even they were saying how gas flaring is something that it's terrible, and we need to get these oil extractors to pay for their crimes, and we need to find ways to improve this. Bitcoin has fixed that, right? I wouldn't have come across that. I wouldn't have even thought of that if I hadn't dug deeper,
Yeah.
if I hadn't kept going.
As you started to describe it, I realized that Adam O, he was one of my guys I interviewed. This is exactly what he does in
Mm,
Colorado. His company makes these things, and
amazing.
he's the sales rep that goes into the oil fields and try to convince these old oil guys that, hey, there's this thing. So imagine taking an oil field guy and explaining everything about Bitcoin, and you need to put one of these on your oil wells, and you can stop flaring this gas. He's got a good sales pitch. He
Yeah.
was he was one of my early guests. It's what else do you see Bitcoin fixing out there? That's a great example of something Bitcoin is fixing.
Food, like I said. So
So,
how Bitcoin? I made a really in depth video about this. I
uh-huh.
posted it on YouTube. So if you have people who want to watch it, go there. But essentially, right now, food is controlled by these massive corporations. Right? Uh, they have so much power. They have purchasing power over raw materials. They have the ability to lobby and allow certain ingredients. Are you in the U.S.?
Yes,
You're in
New
the U.S.
Orleans,
Okay.
Louisiana is where I'm.
Okay. Amazing. Okay, so I'm in Canada. In Canada, I think it's a little bit better, but I've seen these posts where they say how in the U.S. there are certain ingredients in food that aren't allowed anywhere else,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, that's a little scary because the only reason why that's even happening is because these massive corporations want to make bigger profits, right? Their goal is to make as much in profits as they can. They're using these.
I thought it
No,
was
go
to
ahead.
produce nutritious food for us.
Maybe, but I mean, but I don't see that happening, right?
Right.
But yeah, so what they're doing is essentially they're replacing these good ingredients because they're too expensive with bad ingredients. So there's an example. McDonald's used to use beef tallow to fry their fries.
Mm-hmm.
Now they use industrial grade vegetable oils, right? Because beef tallow is more expensive. Beef tallow takes a lot of energy to produce. You need actual cows. You can't expedite the process of creating cows, right? You can't do that, but you can create more vegetable oil. All you do is you put in better machinery and you keep adding more and more machinery. You keep producing more and more oil. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is where if if we have something like Bitcoin as money, instead of having to pay these, let's say, when's the last time you've paid cash at Walmart? Probably never. I haven't paid cash at Walmart in years, right? There's no reason to. But the thing is that we're so reliant on these credit cards, but the credit card companies are making massive, massive profits, and that's adding to our costs, right? And if you have Bitcoin, you don't need these credit card processors anymore. You have Lightning, you can use the base layer. It basically eliminates 3 to 5% expense on every single item that we buy, every single thing that we buy. So I was looking at how much profits Visa is making versus Walmart. Visa is making 50%. Their profit margin is 50%. Walmart's profit margin is like 2%. What's Visa doing? Visa is essentially just moving. They're helping us move money. That's it. What's Walmart doing? They're providing us with something that we need. I went to Walmart a few days ago and I got a clothes drying rack. Visa's not giving me that, but Visa somehow was part of they were part of the transaction, and it cost me $35 to get that clothes drying rack. And Visa took what, maybe $2 out of that transaction for doing what? Updating a book,
That's it.
right?
Creating a digital
That's it,
ledger.
right? And they didn't produce anything. They didn't give me anything. Of course, they made the transaction easier, but that's what Bitcoin does. So I think there are so many aspects of the world that are right now they're just designed to extract as much wealth from us as possible. And a lot of these processes, I don't know when it's going to happen. It's going to take some time, but a lot of these processes are going to be eliminated, right? And that's because of Bitcoin.
I see two types of stocks, companies that you can invest in, and it's sometimes alluring to invest in those that are moving around digital information because they're so high growth and stuff. But then you've got companies like Tesla and Apple and Exxon and Walmart that are actually making and moving physical property that it's really hard to compete with them because they had to build the factories, the steel, the land, versus somebody like Uber that can get deleted by Tesla overnight when their cars go. Like all of a sudden, the entire value of Uber and Lyft just go to zero overnight.
Yeah.
And same thing with Visa. You know, there are big monsters out there like Apple and like Microsoft that can just totally consume these entire stocks overnight. They can go from this is a hot stock that you can buy, the next up and comer, to zero, because one of the bigger companies can just digitize their entire company.
Yeah.
And so do you see a danger or do you see maybe Bitcoin as a safety net for those that are still investing, trying to preserve their capital in stocks, to maybe stick more towards the physical companies? Or do you see, you know what, you should just exit all the stocks because they're a distraction, like you said earlier?
See, I feel like the issue with stocks is that every company can be not distracted. Every company can be disrupted. Right, like let's say you have a large food producer. That food producer can be, they can be disrupted by people who are going to local farms, right? If a local farm starts accepting Bitcoin and you can pay them with Bitcoin, they give you the highest quality food. Why would you keep going to Walmart to buy your meat, right? If the prices are similar, why would you do that? There's no reason to, because the farmer is giving you better quality food. They're giving you much higher quality food. They're giving you, they're letting you pay in something that you've saved for a long time. You have a lot of this thing. You can get rid of it if you want to. You can give it away, get something of value back. You can distribute the value. I think a lot of Bitcoiners, they're very long term oriented. They're not short term oriented. They're thinking more about 30, 40, 50 years from now, right? And I think that's what's gonna change things. I have a feeling that, let's say, also all the companies that we deal with, one of the reasons why, like let's say, okay, Walmart and McDonald's, one of the reasons why they're profitable is because their profits are essentially funded by taxpayers. Have you read the stat where Walmart and McDonald's employees are the biggest recipients of SNAP benefits? So
No.
SNAP benefits are,
What's
of course. So SNAP benefits are food stamps. So you get, I forgot what it stands for, but basically food stamps. So all these people who are working at Walmart and McDonald's pays some of the lowest wages in the entire world. And they're paying these wages to people who are not able to sustain their lifestyle. So instead of using their wages to pay for their food or for whatever, for their home, for their meals, they're using uh, taxpayer funded benefits to pay for their food
So
because
their
all
wages
these companies
are subsidized essentially.
exactly their wages are being subsidized. That's exactly what it is. So when there's no longer the ability for the US government to print money and create these food stamps, when we go to a Bitcoin standard, it basically removes that. It removes McDonald's ability to extract wealth, extract labor from their employees. It removes Walmart's ability to extract labor from their employees because their employees are basically forced to work there. I mean, there's the opportunity cost of getting minimum wage versus starting a business. Starting a business takes some time. Minimum wage, you get paid right away. So these people are thinking, I need to pay for my food, I need to pay for rent, so I'm going to work this job. It's the only way that I can do it because in the short term, I need to pay for all these things, but their cost of living keeps going up. So they're more and more reliant on these jobs, right? And on a Bitcoin standard, I think it flips things. I think it flips it around. So on a Bitcoin standard, if you can't get SNAP benefits, you work at McDonald's, you're going to starve to death, right? So it gives more people the incentive to work for themselves, to build a business of their own. So I think these small businesses, because there's a lot of people who are very, very smart out there, but they're
Mhm.
stuck in dead end jobs. They're stuck in minimum wage jobs, or they're stuck in, let's say, a bank, working as a, a a hedge fund manager or an investment banker, or just wasting their potential doing work that's basically just moving money from one pocket to the other. They're not really creating any value. But all these people, when there's no job available for them as an investment banker, they're going to find ways to produce value so they don't have to work a McDonald's job, or they can create something, they can create a business where they get properly compensated for their ideas. And I think what this is going to do, I think what Bitcoin is going to do is it's going to create, it's going to give people the, sorry, not create, but it's going to give people the ability to be creative. It's going to give people the ability to be creative and get paid for it, because everybody can pay you in Bitcoin for whatever you produce. Let's say you produce an ebook, you can get paid with Bitcoin through Lightning, and nobody can stop that. But the other thing, again, all ties in, right? It's all just one big loop, right?
Right.
It all works together. So if you think about it from that perspective, all these people, they now have a lower barrier to entry because they don't have to pay Visa their 5%.
Yep.
Right. So with Visa, you have to
Right.
have a minimum transaction amount. With debit cards, you have to have a minimum transaction amount. With Bitcoin, you don't. You can literally sell something for one Satoshi if you want to.
Mhm.
Right. Lightning is not going to charge you many fees. The wallet that I use, it it barely charges any fees when you have a small transaction.
Yeah.
Right. And that, I think what that does is it lowers the barrier to entry, and it gives more people the ability to start businesses like Netflix. Netflix took down Blockbuster. Would Netflix have happened if whoever created it, whoever the CEO is, whoever the creator, whoever the idea was generated by, would that have happened if that person were working at a hedge fund or as an investment banker? Right? They
Right.
had the incentive to do it. They had the ability to come up with that idea, so they pushed themselves to create that idea. I think all this is going to do is it's going to make things better and better and better over time. I think every technology will be disrupted, and I think the money, the base layer of everything, will be the reason for it.
Yeah, and I think the middle class traditionally tends to spend locally, other than the highly centralized financial world, maybe in Wall Street or in these centers of finance. They they almost don't spend the money; they just reinvest it, or they hoard it, or they keep it just in New York, or they keep it in London. Whereas once a middle class person starts to become, say, a millionaire, they'll invest locally in their city, in their towns, in their parks. They'll employ their artists. They'll buy
Yeah.
at farmers markets. They'll buy a little. They'll spend a little bit more money because the money is now brought local. I think um, Bitcoin is going to localize wealth. Well, right now,
Yes.
wealth is centralized into financial hubs all over the planet, and and the Bitcoiners live in the community. Like Bitcoiners don't live on Wall Street. I mean, I'm sure there are
Yeah.
a few, but for the most part, Bitcoiners are spread throughout the planet. And so it's
Yeah.
just to take the wealth and just basically layer it all over the world as the social layer of Bitcoin grows. It's just the Bitcoiners are going to be the future wealthy class, and they're going to spend money where they live. And that's going, to me, that's going to start employing a lot of your local artists, your local communities, your local restaurants, your local food vendors. And it won't be such this centralized everything. It seems like everything is centralized right now. And I think Bitcoin's going to swing that into the other direction. That's
Yeah.
my hope, at least.
I completely agree with you. I think a lot of Bitcoiners are very generous. So I've met so many people who are Bitcoiners who have given away Bitcoin, even though they know exactly what it is, right?
Yes.
I've given Bitcoin to family members, even though I know that the price is going to triple, quadruple, 10x, 100x. I've given Bitcoin to people because I know for a fact that these people, this is maybe their first touch point where they see themselves getting this thing, and they've actually started buying after I gave them a little bit for
Yeah.
free. But I mean, the point is that I gave them a little bit, and now they're going to be able to use this thing. They're going to be able to accumulate this thing, and they're doing it because I gave them that little bit. But I think what Bitcoiners do is they try to make the world a better place. I think that's the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah.
The ultimate goal is to get as much as a Bitcoiner. My goal is to get my family out of the reach of the financial system, to not have to rely on governments, not have to rely on handouts. That's the goal, right? That's the thing. That's what you want, and we will do whatever we can to contribute to that.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that you're doing that. I know for a fact that there's a guy. Do you know who Andreas Antonopoulos is?
Oh yeah, that's the guy that I spent 40 hours trying to understand. I thought I was way too dumb for these conversations mostly when I started back in 2017. I
Mm.
sat in Breckenridge, Colorado on a ski trip. I had my whole family there, and I just went to a coffee house at 5 in the morning, and I would come back just so excited. I'm like, guys, this is going to change the world. And they all looked at me like I had three heads. Um, but he was my first content. I'd
Yeah,
say on that one ski trip, I was 40 hours deep into his content.
I'm not surprised. He says that he's given out thousands of Bitcoin,
Oh,
right? And
I don't doubt it. I
and if
don't.
he and why would he do that? He gets nothing out of it. You get nothing out of. Okay, so us posting about Bitcoin, we barely get anything out. We get a little bit of ad revenue, whatever, but
Mhm.
it's not that much, right? For me to put my content out there, it takes me hours of research, hours of learning. I don't have to do that. I do it because I want to help people. I want to get people on this before Wall Street owns everything, before BlackRock owns 95% of the Bitcoin, right? And that's not possible, but before that happens, I want people to be able to accumulate one Bitcoin if they can get there. If they can get to 0.1 Bitcoin, they can get there, right? But I mean, I think that's the main thing here, that with the content creation, with adding value, with creating value. It's like what you said. A lot of Bitcoiners, they do want to improve their society. They do want to improve their neighborhood. They want to improve their community. I mean, at a point, I'm almost 100% sure that Bitcoiners' names will be everywhere. They'll be on hospitals. They'll be on community centers because they'll be the ones contributing, right? They want the world to be a beautiful place. They want things to be pleasurable for everyone. They want people to be happy. They want people to not be depressed, and they'll do whatever they can to contribute to that.
Yeah, I was in large gift benefactors donations for a church group in another life, probably about a decade ago, and I was just blown away by the generosity of the local wealthy people and how much they would just give. And this is stuff that came directly out of their children and grandchildren's inheritance, but they were so generous with the legacy they wanted to leave behind in their community. So, I mean, think about every $1 million they gave away. It was $1 million their own flesh and blood didn't inherit. And they just spread their wealth all over the whole community, especially leading up to their death. And then, especially after the old man dies, the grandma, she gave away even more
Well,
because,
but see, that's the thing. They're not giving it directly to their kids, but it's like planting the seed for a tree. right? You're
Yes.
not getting that benefit. Maybe your kids aren't getting that benefit, but your grandkids are, right? Your great grandkids are getting that benefit when that tree's 100 years old, right?
Yeah.
It's when I was going to school, we were paying for a building, we were paying for a student center where I was paying something like $800 a semester to fund this building, and I didn't even get to step foot into it. Right? It's just you're doing it for students in the future. You're doing it for children in the future. You're doing it for your grandkids. You're doing it so your kids can see your community flourish and
Right.
they're part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that really is part of the human psyche, is to leave a legacy, to leave something behind. What is this all
Yep.
for? How do I make a mark? And if you walk through any university or any library or any park, you see names of dead people long ago that felt the need to do that. And so I think the more wealth we get into the hands, which I think mechanistically, this is what Bitcoin does. It puts wealth into the hands of the value creators, not the thieves. And
Yeah.
so to me, value creators are very generous with their money. Now, if you had to take your money from people that created the value, those are the people I think that aren't maybe as generous as those that created it.
I think at that point it's not even about the people. Like, okay, so let's say you have a large financial institution that's charging 20, 30, 50% interest. At that point, they don't have morals, right? They don't care about the individual who they're taking who they're taking the wealth from. They're taking 20, 30, 50% interest from them. They don't care about that in that individual. It's a corporation, it's an institution. It's
Yeah.
amoral. All they care about is profits. I think that's one of the problems with having crowds make decisions, right? So let's say you have a bunch of shareholders who are voting on something where maybe they can either improve the world, they can make it worse. The majority of people are probably just looking out for themselves,
Hmm.
right? They're going to be, because nobody's judging them, because they're not taking the actual action. They're going to vote for whatever is most profitable for them because they're not seeing the direct impact that's happening. They're not seeing the end user, right? They're not seeing the person who's homeless, the person who they're not seeing the single mother who can't afford groceries, right? They're not seeing all that stuff. All they're seeing is the profits. They're seeing their dividends. They're seeing their rental income. They don't care about what happens to the entire group, to society. That's part of it, right? I mean that's mainly what's brought us to where we are today.
Yeah.
Corporations control the entire world. Institutions control the entire world. And when institutions control the world, everybody becomes amoral. They stop caring about the people around them. They stop caring about helping people with their personal situation. They start thinking more about themselves, and that's that. I think that's always going to happen.
Yeah.
Always going to be That's always going to be the issue where we're always having to deal with people who are making decisions for themselves and not for society. But that's what Bitcoin does. So what Bitcoin does is it takes that power away from corporations and it gives it to individuals. Like you said, now individuals can invest in their communities. They can
Yeah.
build their community. Why would Jeff Bezos do that? Right? He has no reason to. He already has his community. He can
Right.
move anywhere in the world. He doesn't have to worry about a specific region or a specific neighborhood because he doesn't care. I mean, I'm sure he gives money away, but he technically doesn't have to care at all.
That's right. So where can, or maybe look, I think if you hit the three dots, you can actually under edit name and headline, can you type in maybe where we can, your YouTube channel or something, that way it's on the actual
Ah,
screen
I
so
see it.
people can.
I think if you just search for Rajat Sony Bitcoin, it should work. On Twitter, I'm Rajat Sony Finance with no I in that one
Yeah,
right there.
there you
That's
go.
my Twitter. And
Okay,
then
good.
Rajat Sony Bitcoin on YouTube. Um, I also have Rajat Sony Bitcoin on Instagram, and then I have Rajat Sony Finance, where the finance has an I, so you can follow me on Instagram as well.
Sure. Fantastic. Well, look, I'd love to do this again. I love your content. I try to
Absolutely.
repost and share a lot of your stuff. But yeah, maybe in a few months. You wouldn't happen to be going to the Nashville conference, or are you
I
planning on?
don't think I'm going to be going. I've been really busy these last few days, just trying to create my own content, and I haven't even thought of it.
Yeah, we'll keep doing it, man. I love your stuff, and anything we can do to help. And come on to the show anytime, 8 to 10. I love to hear you comment. And the Saturday show is our TradFi show where they talk a lot about the finances. But you're welcome to come on at any show and weigh in. Love the
Amazing.
love your voice being part of the stage. But
Appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on here. It's always an honor to be on somebody's podcast when they dedicate their time to having a conversation with me. I appreciate it.
fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much, and hope to see you soon. And keep creating. And y'all can, for those of you listening, you can find Rajat on YouTube and on X. Follow him. His Twitter feed or his X feed is amazing. I love it. And so, like, share, repost, anything you got. But thank you for your time today.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Craig.
All right, Rajat. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So that was an interview with Rajat Soni. You can find him on YouTube at, I think, just his first and last name, Finance, Rajat Soni. He is also regularly on X. His Twitter feed, his X feed is amazing. It's really well thought out content. He does a lot of research. If he produces a piece of content, he's got hours of work and research behind it. Super smart guy. And he's doing a lot of the legwork for you to have good consumable content. In addition to that, if you want to hear the Bitcoin Daily Show every day, 8 to 10, my name is Craig LeBlanc. I'm only one of the hosts. We have 8 shows with 12 hosts that produce great content, different content on Bitcoin. So I'll quickly run through it. Today, Monday, we had Kendall. She is the meetup queen. This girl is so gifted in creating meetups, and this is the in-person meetup. So if you're a Bitcoiner looking to learn more, you really should look up either on the Meetup app or Orange Pill app, or hit me up on X or Kindle, and you should go to your in-person meetup. What do I mean by in-person? It's just Bitcoiners meeting at a local pub or restaurant or park once a week, once a month. Some of these are just super casual, and others they'll bring in a speaker and might have 100 people or a book signing. So that they range, and they're almost in every city in the world. There's a Bitcoin meetup. So you should definitely do that, because you are who you hang around, right? And so if you hang around people that are creating value and are looking for a smart place to store that value, the Bitcoiners is that crowd. And meeting them in person really, I think, is the social layer that's necessary. So that's she does a whole show every day, every Monday, 8 to 10 on X Spaces. On Tuesday, we have BT Cosmonaut Weston. He actually introduced me to Rajat, who I just interviewed. And he goes and tries to find these content creators that are creating all sorts of content, whether it's writing a book, making great content for X, or maybe a YouTube channel, stuff like that. He interviews them, and you really get to see how they create content. You get to ask them questions live. So if you're not familiar with X Spaces, you really should get into it. There's a lot of good content there. It's just if you slide, I think, right on your phone on the bottom, you see Spaces. You can type in Bitcoin, and you'll see every day, 8 to 10 a.m., the Bitcoin Daily Show has a show. And so if you go to the Tuesday show, you can hear a Cosmonaut show, and you can talk to live one of the content creators he has found. Okay, so then Wednesday, let's say you're new to Bitcoin and you really don't quite understand it, and you're looking for maybe a 5th grade explanation, or maybe you just don't even understand money or the history of money or fiat and how that works. So we have got 2 of, I think, world-class PhD doctors that have dedicated their life to explaining money, to education. It's Deanna and Joel. Deanna just wrote a book called Shells to Satoshis. She finally finished her book last week and announced it on our show. I actually interviewed them. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see them both. But they actually do the 2-hour show on Wednesdays, where it's just education, and you can come up to the stage and ask any question you want about money, about gold, the history of finance, the history of store of value, the history of means of exchange, and how all that stuff works. Because if you're new to all this stuff, it's a whirlwind. They have great depth and understanding about Bitcoin and the circular economies and such. All right. So then Thursday, if you are into grid scale electrical production, so we're talking like 1,000 megawatt generator that might run a whole city. Macro and Brad are engineers, entrepreneurs. They have spent their life and career in electrical grid scale production and Bitcoin mining, and how these two are intersecting and are going to change the way the grid is built, are going to change the way electricity is produced, and these huge assets that produce this electricity, these big power plants, how they're monetized and how this is changing the whole landscape of energy production. It's a very engineering kind of space. So if you have someone in your life that's engineering minded and maybe not so big into the financials and the financial world and how money is made, maybe this might be a better way to what we would call in the Bitcoin space orange pill someone that is more closer to like an electrician or an engineer. This might be the show for them, and that's every Thursday. It's called Energy and Bitcoin Mining Show. Okay, so Friday we have two of my favorite hosts. It's Hector and Tracy. Tracy and Hector have this unique gift of just going super deep with someone who has dedicated their life to Bitcoin. First, they go find them. They find somebody that has dedicated their whole life to Bitcoin on some little topic. I'll give you a great example. We had a guy by the name of Texas Slim that started the Beef Initiative, which is explaining how the cattle industry, the state of the cattle industry, and how Bitcoin intertwines with it. And this guy's dedicated his whole life basically to the cattle industry and saving it. Huge Bitcoiner. And so she's interviewed him a couple times now, and she'll go find people just like him to come onto the show and just tell their whole story and their whole mission. And I can tell you, it's just a beautiful show every Friday. I don't know how they pull it off, but thank God for Tracy and Hector. I love their show. It's to me, it's almost like we should call it the show of hope. It's so much hope in their show. Really feel good show. All right. So then Saturday, our show from 8 to 10, we have actually two shows on Saturday, one from 8 to 10, and then our only show from 10 to 12. So our first show, 8 to 10, is run by TJ, who is a CFO, but then he has two Wall Street analysts, Mark and Frank, that have spent their life on Wall Street analyzing everything that you can analyze on Wall Street to advise people, these big money managers, but they also understand Bitcoin at a deep level. And so it's rare that you get someone that understands Bitcoin and how Wall Street and big checkbooks thinks in the same brain. And so on Saturday, they go into what is Wall Street thinking, the institutional money, traditional finance, that kind of stuff. If that interests you, if you're an investor, if you're into finance, you're going to love this show. And it's some great minds. You come up to the stage, ask questions, contribute to the conversation. All right. So then after that, we have James over in Spain with a newborn little baby, puts on a great show. He finds the circular economies of planet Earth that are now into Bitcoin. So this is not just store value. This is means of exchange, which means trading and using Bitcoin to buy and sell goods and services in these local villages, Bitcoin Beach, like Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador, but across the planet. The founders of these circular economies, he brings them onto the show, interviews them, and you really get a sense of the global phenomena that is Bitcoin. Another great show that James puts on. And then my show is on Sundays. The only show I host. All the other shows are put on by these co-hosts and hosts and speakers. We've become quite a network and a family. It really is a team effort. I can't speak highly enough about my fellow co-hosts and hosts in the Bitcoin Daily Show. The only show I do is actually my Sunday show, which is Philosophy Sunday. We had to give our philosophers of Bitcoin an outlet to talk because they were hijacking all the other shows. Bitcoin has a way of making you going super philosophical and super deep about man's search and quest for truth. And so we gave it its whole show. So from 8 to 10, if you want to go way deep down the rabbit hole of what Bitcoin is and what it means and what's the meaning of life, that's my show on Sunday. So one of my favorite, it's something that I look forward to each Sunday. and it's a very relaxing show. A cup of coffee. Love it. So please join us every day, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on X Spaces. And then I'll continue to do these live interviews with some of the people that we discover and find across all the shows, and really give them just an interview for themselves to really tell us a little bit more in depth and video on what they're doing and the value they're bringing, and just about Bitcoin. I hope this is helpful for you guys. Thank you all so much for the love and support. I will be in Nashville along with a bunch of the hosts. We'll be at the Bitcoin meetup table. So in the convention, they gave us 2 tables just for people who are organizing in-person meetups. I organized 3 in-person meetups in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette weekly. And along with, I think there's like 80 other organizers that are showing up in Nashville. So if you want to learn about how to organize it, it's not just for organizers, Bitcoin meetup organizers, but even if you're interested, please come by the table, say hello to me. I'd love to meet y'all in person, along with all the other Bitcoin daily show hosts. Say hello, I'll take a picture, and I'd love to put a name to the face. So again, I'm Craig LeBlanc, founder of the Bitcoin Daily Show. Thank y'all so much again for the love and support. Let's go stack some sats today, get them while they're cheap. And we'll see y'all tomorrow morning. Thanks a lot. Bye.